2022 was a great year for horror, from shiny new entries to beloved franchises to fresh reinventions of the genre. It seemed like there was a new horror film in everybody's mouth every week this year. With the good though comes the bad, and there are 3 films that I would like to include in my dishonorable mentions list for Crimes Against My Eyes before I focus most of this video on films that I did love this year. So my selections for the worst of 2022 unfortunately start with Smile. Smile was a hit at the box office, but the film itself feels like a weak rehash of elements seen in other horror films like It Follows or The Babadook, and in the scenes between cheap jump scares, the film is just a boring saga of our protagonist traveling between dull locations having the same conversation over and over again. At least that's how I felt watching the movie. I know a lot of people found stuff to enjoy in this film, but this movie would certainly scare the crap out of some 13-year-olds, but there's not really much else to it. Next we have Choose or Die. The only reason I watched this was because I saw that Robert Englund was a part of the cast, and I am here to tell you all that he is not actually in the film. He has a small vocal cameo, and the rest of the film is an unbearable mess that borders on unwatchable. If you get the choice, avoid this Netflix original at all costs. Halloween Ends. I was a huge fan of David Gordon Green's 2018 Halloween film and was thoroughly disappointed with last year's Halloween Kills personally. Therefore, going into Halloween Ends, I was hoping for the best but expecting the worst. And honestly, I think it is a better film than Halloween Kills, but it comes nowhere near fulfilling the potential that Halloween 2018 set up 4 years ago. There are some interesting and unexpected things that happen in the film, especially pertaining to the character Corey, that I think would have worked if Corey was a character that we met back in 2018, or if they introduced him in Kills. I think it could have been a lot stronger. At the end of the day, Michael Myers is barely in Halloween Ends, but once the plot does circle back to the shape, it provides a satisfying conclusion to Laurie Strode and Michael Myers' beef. I have mixed feelings clearly, but I do know that Halloween Ends is well within the so bad it's good territory for me, and it does take the franchise somewhere you weren't expecting, but by all means, it's not a very good Halloween film. Alright, before I list off my 10 favorite horror films of the year, I want to give some of the spotlight to the films that just barely did not make my top 10. By the way, I'm trying to keep this video as spoiler-free as possible, in case you guys end up checking out these films for it yourself. My honorable mentions start off with Fresh. Fresh has moments of excitement and high tension, as well as some interesting twists that make it a very fun watch, but all in all it didn't leave a huge impression on me as much as I had hoped. If you like films like Ex Machina or 10 Cloverfield Lane, I think you may appreciate this film's approach to the imprisonment trope. Next, let's talk about Dark Glasses. I've been a fan of Suspiria for years now, but over the last couple of years I've begun combing through Argento's wider filmography since Shudder began to get the streaming rights to a number of his films, and this year Shudder got the rights to his newest and first film in 10 years, Dark Glasses. It's his return to the giallo genre, a genre in which he is nearly synonymous with, and I enjoyed it a lot. At times it does feel like Argento's old tricks with watered down visuals, but Dark Glasses has its moments, and I would recommend it to fans of giallo or Argento, but it may be less enjoyable to someone without that background knowledge of his previous work. If you're just getting into giallo though, I would recommend his earlier films, my favorite of which, like I said, are Suspiria, but also The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, or Opera. Next, let's talk about the 2022 Hellraiser reboot. It's a reboot/sequel of Hellraiser, and it was this close to making my top 10 as I thoroughly enjoyed David Bruckner's approach to this universe. This version of Hellraiser has some incredible visuals and great atmosphere, but it gets a bit drawn out and convoluted in its third act for my tastes. Fans of Hellraiser have been a bit divided on it from what I've seen, and while I did love the film, it just isn't quite as memorable as the films that I'm about to mention. Alright, now here's the real deal, my top 10 horror films of the year, starting with my number 10, The Menu. With The Witch, Split, Last Night in Soho, and now The Menu, Anya Taylor-Joy is collecting an impressive array of horror projects on her road to Scream Queendom. The Menu is a black comedy horror centered on a celebrity chef played by Voldemort himself, who invites a select group of his past customers on a dining experience like no other. Anya Taylor-Joy plays Margot, the only guest who was not invited by Voldemort. The film is shocking, violent, and has some relatable commentary for anybody who's ever worked in the food service industry. The cast is all great, and I was particularly pleased to see Judith Light here, and her performance was definitely up there with the two leads in her, albeit smaller, role. My problem with the film is that its tone doesn't really work for me. As with any comedy horror, the funny and the scary don't always gel very well, and to be honest, the film's not particularly funny. It's humorous, sure, but don't expect to be laughing more than once or twice. I think the film would have been stronger if it dedicated more energy into the horror and suspense, because at its most tense moments, I think the film is shocking, dark, and has very great performances. However, there are a couple films higher on this list that I felt nailed a better mix of comedy and horror than is on display here. Number 9, No Exit. No Exit starts with a simple but effective premise. 5 people are stranded at a rest stop in a snowstorm when one of them discovers a kidnapped child in the back of one of their cars. Trapped in the bitter cold with no cell service, Darby, a recovering addict, must figure out how to make it out of the predicament with both her and the child alive. The film has a handful of twists of varying effectiveness which try to ramp up the stakes, but there is one twist that I think makes the film significantly worse, and it involves TikTok. You'll know it when you see it. If that one twist was cut, I'd imagine No Exit ranking much higher on the list for me. That's how much that one tiny little scene tarnished the film for me. That aside, No Exit is a tense thrill ride that is well worth the 95-minute runtime. Havana Rose Liu is a great lead, and both Danny Ramirez and Dennis Haysbert deliver great performances here as well. My favorite part of the film, though, has to be it taking place during a snowstorm. The snowy setting adds a lot to the stakes and the atmosphere, and it makes it the perfect film to watch during the wintertime. Number 8. Scream. If I'm being honest, I would have hoped that the 5th installment to my favorite horror franchise would rank higher on this list. The film is a mixed bag for me personally, and there is a lot that I love about it, but there are also a lot of choices that still have me scratching my head 11 months later. I think its attempt to center the story on a new cast of characters while also trying to honor the story and characters of the first 4 films feels inorganic. There are many moments in Scream 5 where the legacy characters get involved in the new gang's Ghostface mystery for no logical reason, and the moments with the ghost of Billy Loomis did not work for me at all. I think that Sam, being Billy's daughter, provides some interesting moments and dynamics in her character, but those are made cheaper by the visual representation of her hallucinating a de-aged, uncanny valley, Skeet Ulrich. That being said, there are a lot of things that I think worked in this entry, and it goes without saying that it was a huge undertaking to have fresh creatives come in and take over a franchise that's been off of our screens for a decade, with a fandom who's very attached to a director who recently passed away. With that in mind, I can see how this methodical approach to reinventing the Scream formula came into fruition. I feel like there are moments where directors Matt Bettilini-Olpin and Tyler Gillett inject their own flair and style into the material, and I still think that they were a great duo for the job. I think the new cast members are great as well. Obviously, Jenna Ortega is having a moment in her career that only keeps growing exponentially. Mason Gooding, Jack Quaid, and Mikey Madison all give a twist on a familiar Scream character trope, but their performances are laced with tons of personality, and I am looking forward to learning more about those surviving characters that the film introduced moving forward in Scream 6. My favorite performance in this film, though, has to be from Melissa Barrera. I think she proved that she has what it takes to be a different kind of final girl for this franchise, with a backstory that is somehow even darker but still so closely linked to Sydney's. Like I said, it would have been a lot stronger for me if they left out the hallucinations, and I do hope that that is something that doesn't continue in Scream 6. The returning cast here is okay. Dewey gets the most screen time of the legacy characters, and I think him and Gale felt like a natural evolution of their characters. Sydney, though, doesn't have much to do, and it was hard for me to really believe that this is the same Sydney, because there weren't any scenes that felt like we were learning about where Sydney was a decade after we last saw her, and really why she's back in Woodsboro. We get glimpses of what Sydney's life is like, but I needed much more from it if I'm being honest. I'm working on an update to my Scream franchise ranking, so I want to save some things for that video, so let me sum up my feelings for Scream 5. When it's focused on the new characters, the movie is better. When it tries to lace in the characters and the elements from the original films, it starts to feel a bit mechanical. But I know a lot of Scream fans loved this newest entry even more than I did, and there is a lot to love about the film, and at the end of the day, I'm very happy that I got to experience going to the theater on opening night for a new Scream movie, and I can't wait to do it again. Number 7, Prey. I'm not a big Predator fan. I mean, I've only seen the first one time, so the fact that this prequel made it this high on the list is saying a lot. Prey takes place in the 18th century and revolves around a Comanche tribe that the Predator alien is targeting. The protagonist is Naru, played by Amber Midthunder, and her dog sidekick are what carry the film. A girl and her dog is definitely not the type of protagonist that the franchise is used to, and the film is so much better because it's telling her story of proving herself to her brother and the rest of the tribe. That girl and her dog duo, and the fact that the film is taking place in such a different time period than the rest of the franchise, really gives it a sense of freshness as well as higher stakes, because these characters don't have the same military grade weaponry that Arnold used to fight the same foe 200 years later. The combat scenes are killer, the family dynamics within the tribe give the film its soul, and then top it off with the science fiction elements of the Predator franchise, which looked cooler than ever to me. On a different note, I'm a big fan of the Cloververse, and Dan Trachtenberg's 10 Cloverfield Lane similarly breathed new life into that science fiction horror franchise, so I'm not surprised at how well he handled this material. Number 6, Barbarian. I went into Barbarian completely blind, and I recommend you do the same if you haven't seen it. But for those of you who have seen it, or don't mind me talking in general about the film, here's what I have to say. The film starts out as cliche as you can get, but just when you feel like you know what kind of movie you're watching, Barbarian flips the entire premise on its head. In fact, every time that the film starts to veer into the lane of predictability after that, it reinvents itself yet again. It's got incredible tension, and I was literally on the edge of my seat while simultaneously wanting to shield my eyes for a few of this film's tensest scenes. Barbarian switches perspectives a couple times in the film, and as a small critique, I'll say that I preferred when the story was focused on the characters of Georgina Campbell and Bill Skarsgård, and the film got slightly less compelling for me when I was focused on Justin Long's character. But his character does provide an extra layer of commentary that amounts to some really strong moments in the final act. I've already said too much, but Barbarian is a crazy thrill ride that I think you should definitely watch in the dark on the next rainy night. Number 5, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. If I were to give an award out to the funniest movie on this list, Bodies, Bodies, Bodies would be my selection for sure. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies centers on a group of filthy rich friends throwing a hurricane party in one of their enormous mansions, where characters begin dropping like flies while the rest of them start pointing fingers at each other. The film is filled with suspense that is paid off with a combination of memorable death scenes and even more memorable one-liners at the hands of its stellar cast. Amanda Stenberg, Rachel Sennett, and Maria Bakalova were my highlights for sure, and those 3 characters represent some of the film's most interesting dynamics and 3 contrasting points of view pertaining to this friend group. Amanda plays Sophie, someone who the friend group seems to have turned its back on. Maria plays Bea, Sophie's new girlfriend and a complete outsider to the group. And then Rachel plays Alice, someone who is very much cemented in the group and enveloped by their privilege and ignorant lifestyles. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies isn't your typical slasher comedy flick. It's got a lot of tricks up its sleeve that I won't spoil here, because Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is another one of those films that you should just experience for yourself. The humor may not be for everyone, and those spoiled rich Gen Z characters are very easy to hate on, but at the end of the day, I would not be surprised if this film begins to garner a cult appreciation in years to come. The humor did work for me, and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is just a clever, fun, character-driven horror that you should definitely check out if you get the chance. Number 4, Pearl. Pearl is the prequel to Ti West's film X, which was released earlier in 2022, and serves as a vibrant, fantastical, and twisted exploration of Pearl, one of the characters that Mia Goth played in X. Mia Goth reprises Pearl's younger self and gives her all in painting a portrait of how this character came to be. Mia Goth also co-wrote Pearl with Ty West, which gives the film a more personal touch, as Mia Goth's performance as Pearl breaks through the barriers of the fourth wall in more ways than one. Tonally, Pearl is more in line with The Wizard of Oz than of X, but in its darker moments of bloodshed, it peels back Pearl's Technicolor curtain to reveal her sinister impulses in all of their horrificness. I loved X, so the fact that we got another chapter of that story in the same calendar year as the original was pretty crazy. I looked forward to Pearl from its announcement, and it did not disappoint. Now I'm just eagerly awaiting news about the third film's release date. Number 3, Nope. I've loved Keke Palmer and Daniel Kaluuya for years, and Nope works for me largely due to their performances, both of which feel like they're straight out of an iconic blockbuster of yesteryear. For Daniel Kaluuya, his character OJ carries the weight of his father's death into every scene, and that emotional depth feeds into his character's motivation. Not only that, but he's able to deliver great comedic moments with the most subtle line deliveries or responses to his sister, and that's because he fully disappears into OJ. OJ is the character we relate to the most, he's the one we view the story through. It'd be easy to write Keke Palmer's character M off as comedic relief, but she too carries a similar depth sparked by slightly different interpretations of the same family trauma that haunts OJ. The sibling relationship in Nope is my favorite part of the film. Clearly, as I haven't really said a word about the horror itself, Nope is a science fiction action film with moments of intense horror, but the horror is definitely not at the forefront of this film. In the spirit of not spoiling too much, Nope begins with a Bible verse. And I will cast abominable filth upon thee, and make thee vile, and will set thee as a spectacle. The scariest moments in the film are used to propel Peele's message of spectacle in some very memorable ways. Nope would be my least favorite of Jordan Peele's films, but come on, what a track record that he's had. I think Nope went places that fans of Peele weren't expecting, and it feels unlike Us and Get Out in a lot of ways, but that feeling that you get walking out of the theater trying to piece together what you just watched is something that no filmmaker nails quite like Jordan Peele. Number 2, Bones and All. Before I get into what I love about Bones and All, let me warn you that this is a film about cannibals, and it does not shy away from showing you all the gory aspects of it, as the title suggests, Bones and All. So this film isn't for everybody, but I think it boasts some of the best cinematography of the year, and much more heart than you would expect. Until those scenes when the guts and gore are right in your face, it's easy to forget you're watching a horror film about cannibals. But like a lot of films on this list, Bones and All is not purely horror, and I'd honestly say it's more of a romance drama, more in line with Guadagnino's Call Me By Your Name than his Suspiria remake. It's also a road trip film, taking you across the isolated Midwestern towns of the 1980s America. It captures the feeling of turning your back on society, or more accurately, society turning its back on you. I drew parallels to the opioid crisis, but because of its slice of life nature, you can honestly take a lot of messages from this film. At the end of the day, the film reminded me of life's fragility and the importance of connection amidst isolation. And if you can stomach the gore, Bones and All is stunning and emotionally resonant. Number 1, X. On the surface, X is an homage to slashers of the 70s, specifically the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. However, X is much more than an homage. Not only is it one of the year's most unsettling films to watch, it's also full of likable and interesting characters and instantly iconic visuals. The writing is smart and packed with layers of irony and foreshadowing that makes rewatching the film a completely different experience than watching it for the first time. Mia Goth's performance here is just as incredible as it was in Pearl, and the first time I watched X, I had no idea that she was in a dual role, and it still blows my mind to watch after knowing that Mia Goth plays both Pearl and Maxine, two starkly different characters, with some crucial similarities. I don't want to spoil anything more for those that haven't seen it yet, but trust me when I say I'm holding back from listing off several moments of this film that have been living in my mind rent-free ever since I saw it. Before the film reaches its darkest moments, we get a substantial amount of time just coexisting with our main characters, almost in real time, and getting to know them remarkably well for a film with a runtime of just over 100 minutes. Aside from Mia Goth, Jenna Ortega, Kid Cudi, Brittany Snow, and Martin Henderson round out the film's dynamic ensemble, and X is a film that I can see myself rewatching annually alongside my other favorite horror films. To those of my audience who are fans of AHS 1984, or just fans of the slasher genre, particularly of the 70s or 80s, X is a must-watch. Alright, so there you have it. Those are my top 10 horror films of the year. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my picks, or just share your top 10 below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like if you want to help its chances in the algorithm, and subscribe for more videos like this if you aren't already. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next year.